Welcome to the Hunt Test Hobo Podcast, your place for truckside chats and insights into the retriever game. Whether you're just getting started or you're a seasoned handler, this podcast is another resource for tips, tricks, and insights from both the amateurs and professional trainers' perspectives. Each week, we'll dive into the nitty-gritty of retriever training, sharing stories of success, overcoming challenges, and forging stronger bonds with our dogs. This is the Hunt Test Hobo Podcast. I'm Chris Rudd, your host, fellow retriever enthusiast, and student of the game. Let's dive in. Welcome to another episode of the Hunt Test Hobo Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Rudd, and today I'm joined by my good friend, Dan Ihrke. Dan and I are going to be doing a series on some, I'm not going to say basic stuff, but stuff that's very foundational, maybe is the best way to say it. We're going to cover a few different topics over the next week and in the following week of basics that are really good for foundation. And I think that no matter where you are in your training journey, hearing these kind of foundational things are going to remind you of things that you could be doing or just maybe help fill that tiny little hole that'll go a long way. But before we do that, I want to just say congratulations to Tyler Brenner and Kaylee for having their first daughter, Elodie May. I think she was born 2 days ago or so. I don't know. There was a Facebook announcement, but the group chat was giving them some hard times because we think her first word is going to be back, because that's how Tyler says it.
I think it should be sit, so whatever.
Sit. Oh, it probably could be sit. Yeah, sit would probably be a better.
Yeah, that's a little before the word back, so a little more foundational. So
yeah, but all Tyler does is run blinds. Don't you know that?
Yeah, but
so
I can actually imagine him when she's old enough to come join him training, and Kaylee's got something else to do. Like literally saying sit to his daughter because he's so used to saying that to a dog to stop movement. So she's in the background. I can say, sit, Mark.
I have definitely said here to my kids often, like, come here. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. Just come here.
So
it'll be okay.
In front of clients,
you give up.
I've literally been driving, going out on a session with clients, with maybe an evaluation, and I'm pulling a pigeon out of a crate, and they're rushing the crate, and I've literally said sit to the pigeons subconsciously, sit. Get them to stop moving, and then I stop myself. I just literally said sit to a pigeon. Yeah. It happens.
Yeah. And speaking of like your little girls growing up and helping, my kids are just now to the age where my oldest is 10 and she can throw good enough that I can be like with my younger dogs, all right, throw this angle back, throw an angle. Like she knows what a Y drill is at this point. And so my younger daughter has gymnastics on Thursday night. And so my oldest daughter goes with me every night to Sharon's and trains with Josh and I, and if Sharon and Vince are out there, we'll train with them. But it is like one of the highlights of their week now, mostly because
I don't know what you're doing right there, but that's fantastic.
Well, it's probably because I'm homeschooling them. And they're like, oh, I get to get out of the house and go do something.
Yeah.
But so I don't know if that's really it. I mean, it is a good thing, but they love riding the ATV. And the thing I think I'm really doing right is there's a Panda Express on the way, and they think that's like a special treat, a Panda Express.
Oh yeah,
and it's great because you just walk through the buffet line. It's quick, so I can still get the Sharon's pretty quick. But we were doing that, and then my younger daughter, who's 8, was complaining, Dad, and she calls it hunting. Why aren't you taking me hunting? For dog training. So last night, she asked me in the morning again. She's like, when are we going to go training? And I was like, well, we can go tonight. I'll ask your mom. So I asked Kayla. She said, yeah, no problem. And if you're listening, Tyler married a Kaylee and I married a Kayla. So just that he followed me, just for the record there. Yeah. But anyway, if you're getting confused, that's why. But anyway, I asked my wife, Kayla, like, hey, can I take Piper? And she's like, yeah, no problem. So Piper and I went and we got Panda Express, and then we went and we rode the ATV and set the setup up. And then I had decided, like, you know what, I'm not going to use electronics. I'll let her pull the winger. So I set up the winger and I was like, okay, pull the winger. And she kept pulling and she could not get that thing to launch. So what I finally did is I stuck a chair out there and I gave her the Dogtra electronics. And so she sat there and pushed the button.
There you go.
And she thought that was the coolest thing in the world. But she's like, can we do that every night? I was like, you can't do it every night, but you can come with me at least once a week now. So that was like really cool. And she got home and she runs in the house and says, Mom, I did this, I did this, I did this. And I was like, I'm going to milk this as long as it lasts, because eventually it's not going to be there.
Enjoy it while it's there. And they'll hit teenage stage and then they'll have other ideas. So, but they're learning a lot more.
Oh, I forgot. The walkie-talkie. Yeah, the walkie-talkie was the thing that pushed it over the edge. She's like, hello, can you hear me? I'm like, yes, yes, Piper, we can hear you. She's like, I'm ready.
Nice.
Tell me when. And so she was my diversion bird. Vince was out there, so Vince threw me my long birds, and then she would throw the short bird just to let him retire and stuff. So it was great. It was really cool. It was really fun. So anyway, I just wanted to say congratulations to Tyler, and hopefully, but I did see that he signed up for a qual like in a week and a half.
Yeah,
I'm
very interested to see how this all really pans out. As you and I both know, and we've agreed on, I don't really think he quite knows exactly what he's getting into with this. But again,
well, nobody does. But I think
he's always seemed to come out on top. So
yeah, he'll be fine. He'll be fine. But when I saw him register for that, I was like, "What are you doing? You have no idea. What are you doing?" But anyway, all right. Well, today we're going to talk about marking primarily. Marking is our topic of conversation today. We're going to kind of cover 3 different areas of marking, and we're going to start from the puppy basics, and we're going to work our way to just basic philosophies of maintaining a good dog and what to look for, and some group training stuff that I think is really, really important if you get the opportunity to train with a group or by yourself. And I'll say a lot of this foundational stuff we're talking about is throughout the course that I have on, the Hunt Test Guide. I think that a good chunk of what is in that course is how I've had to figure out a lot of the things that you teach when you have a thrower, and a bird thrower. I have to stop saying bird boy because my girls give me a hard time. Like, why are all bird throwers boys? And I was like, good question. I don't know. We'll call them bird throwers.
there you go.
But anyway, so I think that this will be a really fun topic, and we'll go from there. So we talk about marking all the time. I mean, we get out and we're together and we're drawing on the side of your trailer, marking concepts or things we want to try, and like, how do you handle this moment here and this? And that's pretty advanced stuff. But so let's talk about the very basics. When you got a puppy, there's 3 different types of marking that we talk about all the time to teach dogs the foundational things that they need to mark. So let's talk about each one of those.
Okay. Well, let's start out with the most simple one, which is what I call complete visual aid marking. And with complete visual aid marking, literally the dog sees the dummy or the retrieving object the whole time, or can see it. So ideally they're focused on it, but with the presentations are such that the dog can see the object at all times. So for example, you're on a golf course and you have a massive white dummy. Okay, so just about from every perspective there, unless you're on really rolling hills or something, just about every perspective, that dog has the opportunity to see that object from the line all the way out. And that accentuates the focus on the object. It helps eliminate all peripheral because, once we establish that with puppy work that the dog wants the dummy, then because it's so visually apparent and they want the dummy, they focus on it more. As soon as that dummy becomes obscured or hidden, the dog tends to take its eye off of it, especially initially, focus on other things like the bird thrower, the hide, the cover in between, et cetera, et cetera. So the first thing we really promote is complete visual aid marking. And even before that, I do a lot of happy bumpers or fun dummies. Specifically, I'll get in front of my puppy. I'll say sit, and I'll go 10, 15 yards in front of the puppy. And then I'll release the dog with a very, very obvious, deliberate release. So the dog knows they're released, so we don't get any confusion with steadiness. And I'll throw the dummy behind me and way up high. And so the dog is learning to track that dummy and run straight to it. Because it's moving, it's attracting the dog's attention. And the reason I do that, believe it or not, is we noticed out here that if we get a dog that's primarily being trained for upland that has been run for a season or two, I'll give you a perfect example. A buddy of mine had a short hair. I never ran the short hair on a setup in its whole life. All I did is hunt. Well, he dropped the dog off for a short period of time, and I said, listen, I don't have time. I've got all retrievers right now. I don't have time to take her out. He's like, just run her with your retrievers. Okay, so brought the dog out, and we had some pretty challenging open field, not a lot of roll to the field, cover probably 8, 10 inches high, and we were throwing birds out to 200 yards. That dog outperformed 80% of my labs, having never done remotely thrown marks. And Tyler and I sat down and thought about it. He said, I've noticed the same thing. And the only thing that we could figure out, which makes a lot of sense, if you watch what happens, especially a level 1 pointer or retriever that's not steady, they flush the bird, and where are their eyes? They're not on the cover. They're watching that flapping bird, and guess what they learn to do? They learn to roll over that cover, disregard it, roll over the hills, disregard them. Their focus is on one thing. So what do they learn to do? They learn to run with their eyes on the bird. They need to run with the eyes on the bird. So that I do a lot more of those fun dummies with my little puppies than maybe a lot of people do, because I think it really teaches them how to run with their head up, focused on the object. And I start out in the open grass, and then I start throwing it into cover very carefully, such that, initially when the bird's hitting the cover, the dog is almost on it. So the dog learns to follow that bird down, watch it bounce in a little bit of cover, and that little bounce while that dog is chasing it, I think really accentuates that picture. It's right here. It's next to this little tuft of grass, right? It's that picture of where it hit. And then I start throwing it such that the dog has to chase it further in the cover, and it's hitting the ground while the dog's still further back. And I slowly make that transition. That's how I teach the dogs to mark in cover, again, before they're even doing remotely thrown marks. And again, I find that to be very helpful in teaching the dogs the picture and where to focus on that picture. And right after I do those, I'll do
let's back up. I want to make one more quick comment. Sorry, there's a slight delay in our recording today, guys. So if you hear us stepping on each other, it's because there's a delay. But I wanted to make one more point to what you were saying about throwing that, or having the dogs be moving and focusing on that bird by pre-releasing them. Is one of the first things that I noticed. I noticed that same thing, and it was totally on accident. Is because I had an older dog that I was setting up a setup for. And to let the puppy do something while we were setting up the setup. And when I didn't have an ATV, I would be walking all of my gear out. And so this little puppy would just be following me, and I'd have a bumper in my back pocket. And I'd let that puppy get so far away from me, like just wandering around, and I'd go, hey. And this was before the dog was even remotely steady. So, hey. And I would just toss that bumper. And it created that same exact thing of that dog is focused on that specific area. And then once I was doing that, I found Hillman has a whole YouTube series on this, and he says that he does it before and after every setup. Now, Bill generally, I think he has like one dog. I'd love to get him on the podcast and talk to him about this, but I think he has like one dog, and it doesn't matter the age of the dog. He gets up, they go out, and they walk around the pond, and he just throws random marks with them being released as fun bumpers every time. Before and after each setup.
I've never gotten to watch that. And it's interesting how two different trainers will come up with the same concept based on experience and analyzing and really thinking. And I'm going to tell you guys out there, this is what you need to do when you're thinking about what you're trying to accomplish with a dog. Anytime we teach a concept, the first time we introduce it, we try to find a way where it's as close to impossible for the dog to fail as literally possible. Okay. So break it down. Think about it. Well, how do we make sure the dog's going to follow that dummy all the way down? Well, throw it while the dog's chasing it. You know, he's going to want to keep his eye on it. And remember, Mr. Hillman is known for having the best young marking dogs out there, as far as I know. And I'm not an aficionado. I don't research a lot, but I know that he's had some incredible Derby dogs, and, you know, that's pretty much all marking. So anyway, that starts the concept of complete visual aid marking. And we do this, I do it until the dog will consistently mark in all different types of terrain, all the way out to as far as we ever want the dog to go. In other words, well, those dogs are in that critical learning portion. Anytime I'm stretching the dog out close to its capacity distance-wise or further, in other words, increasing the dog's distance,
and you're talking about where the dog is currently, not where you eventually want to go. So like you're not, the way that you said it, I thought at first you were saying like, well, if a dog is going to eventually have to do field trial marks, I want to stretch them out to 400 yards. That's not what you're saying. You're saying to their capacity. Like that's always the leading edge of how far that dog can go. What I'm getting at is say that we decide that eventually a dog's going to want to go out to 500 yards, which you know is outside of what I do anyway. But if we did, I would tell the client, if somebody came to me and asked how to do it, I'd say, well, you're going to slowly advance towards that 500 yards, always using objects that the dog can see from the line. And obviously there's lots of tricks like using boat bumpers and things that are giant that the dog can focus on. But I would say use this complete visual aid marking anytime that you're either close to the dog's current capacity or you're stretching the dog beyond their capacity. And then we'll always throw other marks, shorter marks that either have partial visual aid or zero visual aid, which we'll talk about in a bit, to make sure that they're keeping up on that part, because you don't want to leave those out. Trust me, I've done it. I've left cover marks out for too long, and then we get a dog that just will run out to the area and completely get its mind blown. But now they just run straight forever.
Yes, and then if they don't see it, they'll keep going. They'll keep thinking, well, because that's the concept. That's how it works. When you stretch it out, the dog may not keep its focus on that object the whole time. There may be portions where it takes its eye off it because it's a longer and longer distance than the dog had gone previously, but it always learns, hey, eventually I'm going to see this thing. Eventually it'll be obvious. Well, if you take that obvious nature out of it, that dog's just going to keep running and go, eventually it's going to be obvious. Eventually it's going to be obvious. And it'll be, many hundred yards past where the thing landed, still believing that eventually I'm going to go over the next hill and there it's going to be. Well, that's not the case. So we have to keep up with the other concepts and shorter distances so that when we start introducing, longer marks that are not visible, the dog will understand how to go to the area and find the bird. And so now let's go to partial visual aid marking. Partial visual aid marking is literally where the dog is going to see that object for portions of its run from the line to where it is. So a lot of times I'll do it. So in our young dog retrieving field, we call it our retriever field. We keep specifically for either training concepts or just teaching young dogs to mark. When the grass starts to get a little longer, and we don't have time to scalp it down like a golf course, which we ideally would have all the time, we'll literally go out with a mower and we'll mow our fall areas, right? And we'll position the dog. There's a little bit of topography there. It's not doesn't have the big hills, but it's got enough there where if you get the dog on the high ground, usually when we have these different areas mowed and we throw a mark into them, the dog will actually see the mark from the line, and then it'll take off. And because of the topography or the length of the cover, that object will disappear for a certain distance of the run from the dog's perspective. And so the dog basically learns, hey, I see this thing, I'm going to start running. And then eventually it reappears because now they're at a new perspective where they can see the object again. And that builds their confidence that, hey, if it disappears, don't worry, keep going. It's going to be there. And it's a wonderful thing to watch a dog that's kind of beginning to lose. In other words, you set your mark up right. When that dog takes off, it's running out there, it begins to lose its confidence a little bit. And then all of a sudden it gets far enough it can see it again and it picks up steam, right? So it learns how to handle that. And then a lot of times I'll repeat that mark with an orange dummy or something that's harder to see. And so the dog's been there once, so they have a confidence, but now they learn, I might not see it as clearly, or I might not see it at all, but it's still there. So that's partial visual aid marking. And again, all this stuff is started out with puppies. All this stuff is, so with the first presentations we'll give, there's only a short little break in that dog's visual contact. So we set it up. You have to be kind of crafty at how you set it up. Look at it from the dog's perspective. Look at where your fall area is and try to set it up so they'll only lose that visual contact for a short run. So that's partial visual aid. Now we have to move to zero visual aid, and that's pretty simple. The dog cannot see it during any portion of its perspective, and it has to trust the actual fall area. Right. And so, again, I told you we started our puppies with that concept when they were younger by doing fun dummies, progressively making the dog lose visual contact with it further and further and further away from the object by literally when we send the dog. So originally you send the dog as you're throwing it, it's chasing it all the way down. It's pretty much like an outfielder. It's on top of it when it hits the ground. And then progressively, you increase the time interval before you let the dog go. And eventually, you're throwing it and the dummy's almost hitting the ground, and then you're sending the dog. And so it only gets a bounce, and the bounce happens when the dog's further away. So that's how we teach the beginnings of zero visual aid marking. And then we eventually just go out and throw marks with a remote thrower. But if you look at the way that I'll handle every young dog is a portion of their marking on an individual day is the vast portion is usually complete visual aid. There'll be a few, ideally, that are partial visual aid, which are closer to the dog, so a little easier mark. And then there'll be a small portion of them that are zero visual aid that'll be even closer. In other words, a little easier mark. And as this dog makes its progression in its abilities, then the zero visual aid ones and the partial visual aid ones will get closer distance-wise. In other words, they'll all get further out until eventually till the zero visual aid and the partial visual aid marking that we're doing is very close to the complete visual aid. And then we'll just get rid of the complete visual aid marking entirely and just throw zero visual aid. So it allows our dog to continue learning all three pictures progressively in the same general time frame. So we're not losing out on either of those three pictures. And then once the dog gets to the point where I don't need to do those complete visual aid marks in order to get the distance that I want. Then I'll only bring those complete visual aid marks back when there's a concept that I want the dogs to see a picture relative to their surroundings. For instance, a long no drill, where the dog has to go over an obstacle, but I want them to see that dummy out there so they can see the picture. There's the destination, there's the obstacle. That's what the picture looks like. And once they get over the obstacle, it's real easy for them because they can see it. Or a channel mark, where I want the dog to see the picture. There's the channel, there's the destination, perfectly centered in the channel. So I will bring those back during concept marks. That was pretty long-winded.
I was going to just read. That was great, though. There's a couple things I want to just add to this. One was a great example of what you just talked about is, and I think this goes to momentum as much as teaching. So I was running winter on a lot of really serious field trial marks for about 2 weeks. And she doesn't give me a lot of indications when she's getting overwhelmed. And she's such a good natural marker. Sometimes I don't realize that, she's under a lot of mental stress going through whatever she's going through. And we have a qual tomorrow. And yesterday I could tell she was not confident in what was going on. And I was like, that's like the worst thing, right? It's like that's not what you're supposed to do. If you're wondering what you're supposed to do is like a week or two before something that you're going to run, you go to things that make your dog happy and comfortable. And I thought my dog was still happy and comfortable, and I thought I was fine. Well, yesterday, I won't get into the specifics. I just knew, because every dog's different. I was like, okay, she's not happy right now. And so that's why one of the reasons I was like, okay, yeah, we're going to go train tonight. And what I did was I didn't lower the difficulty of the concepts, because I still need her to be confident in those concepts that we're working on. But what I did is I got the mower out and I mowed the side of and I placed all my marks so that it was like a 4 reentry watermark. I was like, every time she comes up, I want her to see that mark, and then she can go back down in the water and just make and it was still 300 yards through a bunch of technical water, but her attitude was awesome because she could see where that was.
Right.
And I mowed the side of that hill. My thrower threw it, so it's sitting on top of that, and that helped so much. And I also did and the thing that I realized is her confidence was on the multiple. It wasn't on a single. She's a super singles dog. She loves to do singles. She'll do great on those. So I wanted to make sure that she was confident in the multiple. So I threw 3 doubles, just very small go birds. But I made sure that was a very strong visual aid to that,
Yes.
bird. And that would be considered a partial visual aid for momentum, because it's just not, It's not possible to make it full visual aid. But anytime that I see a momentum problem with any of my dogs, I always just go back to either partial or complete visual aid marking for a little bit, because we want them to be super confident and it's confidence in my mind in their eyes aren't lying to them. We got to help them understand that their eyes aren't lying to them. Where you think that is where it really is. And nothing builds that confidence more in my mind than partial visual aid marking.
That's right. And
because I think visual aid, they're confident the whole time, but they have to go through that mental turmoil of I see it, I don't see it, I see it, I don't see it.
Right. And what folks in the audience that haven't done this and haven't gone through this have to realize is first thing you have to understand is your dog can't know what it doesn't know. Now, I know that seems like a silly statement, but if you haven't done it, your dog doesn't know it. They don't know how to do it. They're not just going to come out and do it. Nothing makes me more upset than to watch some guy that hasn't trained this dog a concept. And he walks up in the training group and he goes, I'm just going to try it. See what happens. That is, you can bet your life it's going to be a train wreck when you hear somebody, I'm going to just see what happens. That means they haven't trained it. And that means it's not fair to the dog. They're doing it in front of their friends. Their ego is going to be involved. They're going to get upset. and usually they're going to take it out, whether they're actually doing something to their dog or just the way that their energy is. Their dog's going to know they're not happy. Now you're in an environment that's similar to a hunt test. You got the distractions and the excitement of all these people there, and you've just humiliated yourself and your dog. Not exactly what we want to portray to our dog when we're in that environment. We want to have our dog the most excited and the most composed and the most under control when we're in an exciting environment like that, because guess what? That's the finished product environment. So if you're finding yourself going, did I actually train this concept or not? Don't put your ego ahead. Just simplify the scenario. Nobody in the training group's going to go, no, I won't simplify this for you. Come on. Simple. Walk up. Walk up. Give the person, I won't go into it anymore because I know you're going to talk about training groups. So let's just keep moving with the conversation.
Yeah. So the one thing I did want to add is I don't normally go to partial visual aid marking or complete visual aid marking until I've taught them to hunt and cover off of scent. So I separate marking from hunting when I'm developing a puppy. So, and I think that's good because I don't want dogs to run out there and first instinct is to start hunting on the way, right? So that's why visual aid marking trains their eyes to do it, but they have to have the understanding that, okay, I got to where I thought it was. I now have to switch into a hunt mode. And so I do the same thing that you're talking about doing where, you're throwing bumpers into cover, very short, as probably as far as you can throw it. Eventually you're reaching out that far.
Right.
But I specifically think about, okay, where's the wind? And this is really the time that I actually throw birds more. Like I don't throw a ton of birds in marking scenarios because they're not as visual for puppies, but I do a ton of cover marks. And all my goal is if you don't find it, then you can, learn that your nose works. And oftentimes that epiphany takes them a little bit of time because they don't quite understand it. And so the other thing I do a lot of is when I'm doing that training scenario that I'm talking about, where I'm setting something up and tossing fun bumpers like Hillman does, I'll just toss bumpers that I know they didn't see, and I'll let them just stumble upon them. And you'll watch you're not saying anything. You're just walking them downwind like, oh, what is that? And then they work their way and then they find the object. Because we have to teach them that their nose works. And if I fell into a trap with one dog, which I know you did because we've talked about this, is that I went like complete visual aid marking. They'll be the best dogs ever if you just do complete visual aid marking their whole lives. I'm joking. But you do that and then all of a sudden you're like, my dog can't mark. My dog runs straight.
Yeah.
Which is good, but it's not the complete thing.
And see, what happens is with the system that I'm talking about, and I've left out a lot of my puppy work, right? I'm telling you just the portions of zero, partial, and complete visual aid marking. But there's also part of our puppy training that involves teaching the dog to hunt. And, part of our evaluation we do train dogs out here is always a bird or two. And when we take our bird out with puppies, so in other words, somebody comes for a puppy eval, the dog's 12, 13 weeks old. They've started with our puppy video series. It's our first time to see the dog. So we do like a puppy obedience classroom. We do yard marking and we do field work, which includes at one point a live or a dead bird with every dog. And we make sure that we do that portion at least the first 2 or 3 times because we want the dog to be super excited about being down here. But part of that bird work with a young dog is to introduce the concept of memory and hunting. And so we'll throw, for instance, a shackled pigeon or a dead chucker or whatever we've got, whatever's appropriate for the dog. And we'll do some fun retrieves where the dog chases it down. We'll get the dog coming back to us by bringing it back with a check cord and getting excited. So now that the dog, usually this is the first bird the dog's ever seen. Anyway, after we get the dog kind of marking and picking it up and then retrieving it, now we know the dog's had its chance to make the association between the smell and the bird itself. Then we'll actually have the owner hold the dog, and I'll walk over to some light cover, very close, but far enough away where when I drop that bird, the dog can't see it anymore. So I'll drop the bird, and it's usually upwind, right? So the wind is actually going from the bird to the dog. So I'll drop the bird, and then I'll walk back to the dog, and I won't say anything. The dog doesn't know what any commands or any cues mean at this point. The dog's watching me. I'm not going to break the focus. I just literally grab the check cord from the guy, the owner, and I let it go. So I literally set the bird down. I walk back to the guy, and I let the dog go. The dog's going to go over, and because of the wind and the fact that he just picked this bird up 4 or 5 times, dog will have an epiphany, follow that nose right to the bird, boom. You can do the same thing with dummies. Same thing with the dummies in the yard. So yes, there's a way of separating the hunt before you ever really do any marking with the dog or any significant marking. So the dog does know how to go to an area, use its nose, and pick it up. So by the time you're starting to do your zero visual aid marking with your dog, it already kind of has an idea of how to go to an area where it saw something fall and find it with its nose. Yeah. So
yeah, good stuff. I just want to make sure we pointed that out because
the best trainers separate everything.
Go ahead.
Out.
You're going to say that.
Yeah, the best trainers take every concept and divide it up into as many small learning steps as possible and divide them all up and then eventually put them together. And that's what we're talking about with marking.
Yeah. Well, that was really good. So let's talk about group training a little bit and how it's best to handle different group training scenarios. And one of the things we talked about earlier was before the call was how both of us throw marks for our dogs, whether we're running them or we're throwing remote marks. And I wanted to kind of hear, well, first set that up and then let's talk about why you do that. Why you have other people run your dogs and then you throw for them.
Well, there are many different reasons. There are some danger points as well I'd like to talk about. But the first reason that I ever considered throwing marks for my own dogs was the fact that I knew each dog and I knew their problems. And if anybody has ever gone through and watched dogs learning in marking scenarios, they know that the bird person in other words, the one throwing the birds, as soon as a dog leaves the line, is more of a trainer than the dog handler themselves. Unless you're getting to the point where you're doing handling marks where you're deliberately going to put the dog into a factor and handle them. We're not talking about that at all. So 90% of the time when we're doing marking, the bird thrower is more of an educator than the handler. And so I wanted to do it simply because I felt like I needed to be out there to make the correct choices on timing of throwing a second bird, whether I just walked over and gently helped the dog find it if they were lost on a hunt, whether I shouted at the dog to let them know, hey, you've blatantly gone emotional and you're not thinking. Get back here to where you know it is for an advanced dog. All those different things. Whether to throw another bird while the dog has blown past the mark, throw it up in the air, and then shout to get the dog to turn back and realize as the one you've just thrown is falling, to realize where that fall area was to help them not overrun it. You know, all of these different techniques, we know them because those are the techniques we use to train our dogs. But especially if you're in a situation like I've gone grand training, I don't have my bird person there, the one that I'm confident, the one that I'm used to communicating with. So I have no choice. I need to get out there. Now, that's one concept. In other words, to improve the quality of the bird throwing and the bird boy procedures. Second reason is, let's just look at it from the dog's perspective so you can understand this. When the dog, most of these retrievers are up there. You know, these are hunt test, field trial, hot genetic style dogs that we're running. Most of them are intensely interested in the mark, right? You walk them up and they're not thinking about the rest of their day and what they're going to do in the kennel when they go home. They're thinking about the bird. They're excited about the bird. So therefore, a lot of times they're so focused, they don't even remember who's handling them. So when that other person walks them up instead of me, right? Instead of their actual handler. They're not really thinking about who's handling them. They're thinking about where the guns are in the field, and they're excited about the mark. So when they get to that fall area, they're probably under the assumption they're being handled by their normal handler. Okay, so imagine from the dog's perspective that somebody else gets them out, but they're so geeked up to see the marks, they're not even paying attention to who's handling them. So now they go do something out there that is wrong, and they know it's wrong. I can step out. Their handler can step out of the hide, and to them, it's like a magic trick. How did you appear here? How did my handler appear 200 yards out here in the field, right? And, so if you had a dog that was characteristically doing something wrong and you wanted to chastise them verbally a little bit, let them know that you're not happy with them, a lot of times that surprise, they basically come out of it going, my handler is everywhere. Right? And therefore, I need to behave myself everywhere. So that it's the my handler is everywhere concept, and it works great. So those are the two main reasons that we do it. And today, for instance, when we're finished with this, I'm going to have my good friend Debbie Smith, who has trained with me for the Grand for many years, handle my dogs. So typically, the way I'll do it, I'll get the dog out. I'll do the up to the line obedience. That way, I can make sure that my dog is doing everything right. I'll give the new handler a brief description of what we're going to do and some highlights of what might happen with that specific dog, right? So we're communicating and we're making a game plan. Wow, communication, game plan? Keep that in your mind, everybody. Communication, game plan, anticipate what's going to happen before it does. Communicate with all the rest of the people in the field so it actually happens the way you want it to happen. Okay, so we communicate with the person, and then we go through whatever routine I want with that dog. Typically, I start with a few steadiness marks. Guess who has the transmitter when I'm doing the steadiness mark? Me. I'm literally out in the field, short distance, hey, throwing birds. I'm watching the dog. If I see the dog make a move, I make the correction. I'll say sit loud enough so my handler knows that there was a mistake. I'll pick the bird up and we'll redo it. Now I get to be like the judge. I get to see the dog handling for somebody else. I get to see the little idiosyncrasies that when the dog's next to my side, I might not notice. I get to make those corrections, right? Then we go out to the field and we do our other stuff. Now, if I have a dog that I know is extremely stable and doesn't need the steadiness mumbo jumbo, then I might go straight out to do the marking. But that's why it works so well. Typically, after the steadiness stuff, I'll toss the transmitter back to the helper, and then I'll drive out there and do the marks. A lot of times also, a little hint, I'll have a winger or two away from where I am driving, the ATV, so that person can turn the dog away from me to another throw location. So the dog doesn't always learn, it's got to come from the ATV that's driving around. It has to be coming from the ATV. So typically I'll put another winger or a dummy launcher in an area where the mark is going to be almost impossible to fail on. So I don't need to worry about a bird person there. And I'll have the handler turn the dog away from me. I'll launch the launcher, dog will pick it up. So the dog will come out of it not losing any of its disciplines, steadiness, turning with the gun, and then, of course, marking.
Yeah.
And that's how we do it.
It's interesting because Sharon did the same exact thing in a field trial setup a couple weeks ago. She set up, it was I think it was a diamond drill, but for those that don't know what that is, maybe you know what an ABC drill is. It's similar to that. But what she did I thought was really interesting. Is she set up multiple wingers at all the locations, and then she still had the bird thrower in an ATV in the setup. But it was really about, for the field trialers, it was about preventing head swinging. So it's like, no, you look at this one, and then the dog would have to wait for a second, and then they would light the winger up. So it came from it was a marked location of a stick man, but the ATV guy was very obvious in there. And eventually you did get a mark from the ATV thrower, but it was and I thought that was a really,
probably after the dog
after they've gotten,
it's like the final positive reinforcement to say, okay, you can get one from the ATV, but only after you, in a disciplined manner, focus on where I tell you to focus and not focus on the ATV.
Yep. I want to go back to something you said that I think could be helpful for amateurs, because I had to figure this out. One of the things that a lot of times I see is when a new amateur comes who doesn't train in a group often, they come train with us, and let's say they only do winger marks. Well, when a handler or a bird thrower gets out there and throws an extra mark and goes, hey, 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 the dog has no idea what hey, hey, hey means, has no idea how to get help at all. And so then it becomes this really challenging thing of like, well, this dog is not doing this mark correctly. And the only way to really at that point is to get the dog to pick up the mark is to handle, which we don't want, because the dog has never learned how to receive help from the bird thrower. And so what I learned when I saw that happen a few times at training, and it happened to one of my dogs, I said, I have to teach them that. And I actually teach them that as a puppy. And it goes back to those walk around fun marks, is that I would throw the bird in the air when the dog wasn't looking and go, hey, hey, hey. And as a puppy, they're like, what is that? Like they're like, why are you yelling? And then they see that bird in the air and then they go pick it up. Well, you just taught them how to receive gunner help or bird thrower help, at 9 weeks old. So I just think like, if you're wondering of a thing to add, like those little things that you can add in your training program as they're younger really do ladder up into better things later on, because if a dog can't get help, it's hard. And I hear from pros all the time, man, if somebody would just keep telling those amateurs to teach their dogs how to get bird thrower help, it would make my life a lot easier when they come and train with me.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
Just wanted to point that one out.
Good. That's
right, so
great.
We talked a little. Go.
No, I was just saying
that this delay is killing me.
Fantastic thing to say. Sorry about that.
Yeah, that's all right. All right, so we're going to wrap this up here, but I want to talk about just you alluded to, I think it was 3 or 4 ways that you can help your dog, and I'll just repeat them for the audience. So one was to throw a bird and make noise, hey, 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 like we just talked about, which is to me a kind of a default go-to one. You had kind of a little bit of a step out, where you're gently helping the dog know the general direction of the bird. You screwed up an angry intervention, which I've seen you do and I do naturally, but I never thought about it the way that you just said it. And I thought there was a fourth, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it was a popcorn, like throwing one in root or something. I don't remember. Maybe there's only 3 that you you said earlier. But let's break down when to do.
Yeah. Okay. So let's start with the popcorn mark. And usually, again, all of this can really only be done properly if you have good communication with your bird person out there. There's a good, solid line of communication between the handler and the bird person. But the popcorn mark should be used as a preventative measure, not fixing a problem. Okay. In other words, I'll give you 2 scenarios. One scenario, the correct one, is the handler knows that this dog is, either by its previous performance that day or days before, that this particular mark is going to be a little bit too far or have too many factors for the dog to just naturally figure out. So somewhere en route, depending on where the dog is anticipated to break down, there'll be a second, third, or fourth throw. Okay, it's all about knowing, okay, this dog hasn't gone through, for instance, this cover change at 100 yards. So before and after the cover change, when the dog's not expecting to see it, we're going to not draw our attention to our body. We're going to stay behind the hide. We're going to flip that dummy out and then scream when it's at its apex. Therefore, we're not going to draw attention to ourselves as a bird person. And therefore, right before the dog is going to start to break down, it sees it. And then as the dog's going through whatever factor that is where they would break down, another one appears, right? And then the dog's through the factor and on the bird. Okay, so that's situation number one, the correct one. Situation number two.
And let's pause there really quick. Let's pause before we get to situation number two. There's two things I want to just clarify for the audience. Popcorn equals fire drill. People use those words interchangeably. It just means additional birds en route to the mark. Okay. I just wanted, in case you've only heard it called fire drill, I wanted to make sure that you've heard that. And then the second thing is, to me, this is a way to almost get complete visual aid marking for the dog. Like, you're basically creating new visual marks as that dog is going through those decision points that it's struggling with.
But it's also extremely dangerous. So you need to know when to use it, and you need to use it to a limited amount with the dog, because if you start using this too much, you're going to end up with a dog that is staring at the gun as it runs, and that is a horrible problem. So this is one of those tools that you need to use sparingly and carefully. Okay, so only once in a while. And so I always tell my people that train under me, 10% or less. At the absolute most, 10%. That can be popcorn, and it has to be done properly. In other words, when you're doing it, the dog shouldn't be anticipating that throw, because 90% of the other marks, it doesn't get that throw, so it's not anticipating. As soon as your dog starts anticipating that throw, then again, it's going to look back at the gun. You're going to get gun fade. You're going to get lack of focus on the fall area, and you're going to create a really bad habit. But this is a great tool if used that 10% or less, and if used at the right time, and if implemented properly. So popcorn or fire drill, number one, great communication between the bird thrower and the handler, 10% or less of the time, and you should have a game plan before the dog that you even throw the mark. You should know what you're going to do before it happens. Okay, so let's go.
And I'm going to add one other thing too. Sorry. I'm going to keep. Nope, no, we're not going to move on. We're going to come back for 1 second. If your dog breaks down and begins to hunt short, you were too late. You made a mistake in doing this the proper way. Dan said it at the beginning, and I just want to reiterate it. The dog should see a bird prior to where you believe he'll break down, and then after he got through the part that he would break down. And I like to think about the first one as the preventative throw. The second is the good job throw.
Yes.
And if you think about that through those decision points, seals the deal. That's a good way to say it also.
Yes. And it goes back to this.
You could do a popcorn mark. Go ahead.
It goes back to that. Anytime that your dog doesn't know a concept, and clearly, if we need to use this, the dog doesn't know the concept, you make it as impossible for the dog to fail as possible. Okay, that's why that second bird comes out. So after that dog drives through the whatever factor it is, it's on it. Okay, now you've made sure that dog at least one time has successfully taken the line all the way out there. Okay, so that is the popcorn throw. Then we have, I would say, the second easiest for the dog one, which is the use of what I call a throw hey. And the throw hey is used when the dog has either passed the fall area or made the fall area and is leaving the fall area. And so a lot of times we use these with younger dogs that haven't seen a lot of bird boy help. And or if we just simply want to get it over with, get that dog to the bird and get on to the next one. But it's implemented by literally when the dog, okay, guys, focus on me right now, focus. When the dog is not looking at the bird boy, the bird is launched, and then the bird boy screams. Don't go, hey. Okay, scream. Usually it sounds like this with me. Hey! Okay, so no matter what, any dog is going to go, what the hell was that? And they're going to turn around, and what are they going to look at? They're going to look at the handler? No. Their bird is falling out of the sky by the time they look out. They'll look at the bird, not the bird boy. Again, they will look at the bird and not the bird boy, not the bird boy. Almost like I've gotten frustrated with this over time with people that don't do it right. Throw, hey, hey. Throw when the bird's all the way up, hey, hey. Also another pet peeve. If you're going to throw any second birds ever, look at the fall area before you throw it. If you are looking at the handler when you throw, you are not going to hit the fall area right where the original bird fell. The whole idea is we're teaching the dog they have to go to where the bird fell. So if we throw the second bird away from where the first bird was, we're teaching it not to go where the bird fell. So I always tell my bird helpers, when you receive a signal or you're going to feel compelled to throw a second bird, you look at the area, that fall area, so you get an accurate throw. But the throw, hey, hey, the dog is not looking at us. It's either blown past the mark or has left the fall area. While they're still not looking, we silently pitch the bird up and scream, hey, hey. They look back and boom, they hit the mark. It's a way to bring that dog back into the fall area. So the third one is to walk out. And there's variable degrees of walking out. Now, when we walk out, we never bring a bird with us. Because especially young dogs, especially if the dog's downwind, if we have a bird with us and we're carrying it and we're working a young dog and they're downwind of us in the wrong place, guess what they're going to do? They're going to smell the bird in our hands and they're going to run to us as the bird boy. And the whole idea of this is to teach the dog to tighten their hunt, come back into the correct area, and not necessarily hunt right near us. We want them to hunt away from us, away from the hide, away from where it was thrown, to where the bird fell. So if we do that, typically we're going to start out walking a very short distance from the hide, and I'll usually do like a fake throw gesture towards, like we've got a bird in our hand, which we don't, but we're just kind of fake throwing that bird, so the dog is going to be attracted or believed to go out to where the actual fall is. And if I want a dog, I want to encourage a longer hunt and perseverance and staying out there for a long period of time, and I don't want to give him that guaranteed easy help, I will stay close to I'll have the bird person stay close to the hide and just mildly, hey, 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 just to keep that dog's attention in that general area. And I want to encourage that hunt, because guess what? At Hunt Test, our dogs need to know they need to hunt for a long period of time. If it's a dog that I know that either doesn't have a whole lot of experience of that and the likelihood is very low that they're actually going to take that encouragement and stay in that area, then I might have a quicker movement out towards the bird and a louder, more easy to, more apparent, I guess, visual and audio. In other words, if I think the dog's just not going to really pay attention to that person very much, I might have them go out and just make a bunch of noise and flail their arms around. And in worst case scenario, if the dog's still not paying attention to him, pick the actual bird up and throw it straight up and down and say, hey, hey, to get the dog back there. But the best method is, again, to already have taught your dog to be attracted to those words, hey, hey, hey. So when the dog actually sees that person start walking out, they already know, okay, it's going to be somewhere near that person and out in front of them.
Yep. Out in front of them is a good word too.
Yeah.
All right. So the last one, we got to wrap it up. The angry, you made a mistake. And this is for older dogs.
Right. So say that we have a situation where there's some attractive factors behind the mark. And I'll give you a great example. So in our retriever field, we have several areas allocated to drills, and we have cones and white buckets and all these white poles and all these different things. And I will throw marks that are much closer from the dog's perspective than those cones or visual markers in the background. In other words, I don't want them to go to those visual markers. Or say you're
and to give an example could be 100 yards is the mark, and the white cones are 300 to 400 yards in the back.
Yeah.
That
Or
could
with
be
my
what you're
advanced
seeing.
dogs, the mark is 150, and those cones are only 50 yards past the fall, right? Depends on how experienced the dog is. But nonetheless, I want the dog to judge distance properly and not overrun that mark. So this situation, the dog disregards the rules, starts running past to whatever's attracting it back there in that scenario. I will run out of as soon as I see the dog falling into that trap, I will run out and scream, "Hey, hey, get over here. Hey, 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 hey." Now, my dogs know what that means. They're not, I don't run out there and beat my dogs with a whip when I do that. So they're not going to like shut down and go to the fetal position. My dogs know that means, oh crap, I need to get back here. There's a bird there, right? But my handler is not happy with me. And by that growl in his voice, that means I've done something wrong. I've done something wrong. And they know to turn around and come back. Okay, so the next mark, usually if I'm going to do any concept like that, I'll have a series of marks that all have the same concept in it. So it's the concept of repetition, which we use in dog training. So let's just say that I did that. I screamed at the dog when it overran, it came back. Now I go to the next one that looks very similar, do the same thing. Dog overruns it again, but looks a little bit more like they're going to turn around. Now they're thinking, but they still made the mistake. So I growl at them with the same thing, bring them back. I do the third one. And now the dog's had two experiences. By the third one, the dog, I don't need to growl at him. I'm silent. The dog gets to that point where the last time it got growled at a little, it thinks, I probably go overrun to that mark. They come back, they get a success. Boom, I got my success. I get out of there. The dog learned.
Makes sense.
So that's we need to keep this podcast, by the way, because I think we need to have all of our bird boys watch this. we finally got it all.
That was one of the main
place.
reasons I wanted to do. Yeah, I feel like this is a podcast where we talked about developing good marking habits, and then we really talked about how to be a good bird person, primarily because I just know that this information really isn't, it's not, people don't talk about it all that much, which blows my mind for group training because you all need to kind of be knowing and thinking and communicating ahead of time what you want. And Vince, who's Sharon's bird thrower, that they came up from Texas, he's trained with a bunch of different pros and Sharon. And what I find, he's always asking, okay, am I intervening here or are you handling? Like depending on what are you trying to accomplish? He's asking ahead of time so he knows, because like he can tell more out there, like we talked about at the beginning about throwing birds for your own dog. He can tell what that dog's thinking better than even I can sometimes, because he's looking at their eyes. If their eyes are all over the place, he might be like, okay, I'm just going to help this dog get through this, or or this dog's cheating a factor. He knows I'm not going to reward this dog. I know that, the handler is going to intervene and handle because they failed the line to the bird. All those types of things is just, you have to communicate about that ahead of time. And so I just thought that this would be a great topic for folks to enjoy listening to and picking up a bunch of little tiny things. Hopefully, there's not some major aha moments, but a bunch of little ones that just make sense. Even when to do popcorn marks, I think, or fire drill, like when that timing is, I think that's important, because oftentimes I see people doing it when the dog breaks down, which isn't the intent. You should be proactive. Now, if the dog breaks down, really what you're doing at that point, you're not popcorning anymore. You're doing the hey wave bird intervention, which is a reactive method of helping the dog, which isn't bad, but you should be trying to prevent that if you're trying to teach something new.
Yeah.
So Dan, I want to thank you. And I just got go ahead. You want to say something more?
I just wanted to mention, just so people understand, if to go along with your comment there about the wrong implementation of popcorn. In other words, they're doing it after the dog's broken down. If you do that, what ends up happening is your dog has broken down, usually pulled into a factor. And then you're going to throw a second bird. And the dog, if you were to map the line of the dog, it's a guarantee it's going to be a curved line. And then you've taught your dog to take a curved line to get success. And that's why we don't do it. We keep the line straight by being preventative before that breakdown occurs. And so I'm not saying that if the dog goes offline, that the only solution is to call them all the way back, which with my advanced dogs, I either handle them or call them back. But those are advanced dogs. With young dogs, you don't have that option. So you had to do something to get them to the mark. But it's definitely kind of too late, and you're better off to do a throw, hey, get the dog there, and I wouldn't even do that mark again because you've established a poor line. And even with good popcorning, dogs will want to go back to their old line again. They're probably going to try to do good again. So I'll just move. I'll set up a similar mark, but not the same one, and I'll popcorn it the whole time to get a success. We all make mistakes. It happens every day out there with me. We get the timing wrong up. That didn't work out well. All right, let's go and say we've got 3 marks set up, and the one mark we're having trouble with, we had a poor timing. The dog didn't do it right. I'll just have the person move over to another similar area, have them park the ATV, and I say, just popcorn this one all the way. And then we'll get that success and walk away.
Yep. Very good. Well, I got an email while we were doing this that we reached our 25,000th download of the podcast. So congratulations, everybody, for listening. And surprised you made it this far, but I appreciate it. I have a question and people have been messaging me a lot about this force fetch discussion that we had last week. I'm curious if folks enjoy hearing more like these types of podcasts where we really dive deep into a very specific subject, or if you all really like the ones where I just interview random retriever folks and kind of just tell their story, and it's more of like a personal profile on somebody. I like to try to mix it up, but I'm curious which ones you guys all like more. I like them both, but I'm just curious. And for a little bit here, we're going to be doing more of the educational content. But I'm just curious because there's a lot of folks I know that have great stories in the retriever game. That would be fun. So just message me and let me know kind of what you're thinking. There's like 100 different ways to contact me. And so if you don't hear from me quickly, chances are you message me in a way that I eventually will realize that you did. Because I would think we have Instagram, both personal and the Hunt Test Hobo. Then we got Facebook, those both. And then I get stuff through YouTube. So things are just all over the place. So I apologize if I miss you guys. But please send me those stuff. I guess the best way is just to reach out to Chris on Facebook and just message me there. I guess that's my preferred method. So if you're not friends with me, reach out and let me know which one you guys like more, and we'll kind of go from there. So thank you again. And Dan, appreciate all your insight and information, and it was a good one.
Thanks, buddy.